The autumn moon hung low over the Ironwood territory, casting silver shadows through the ancient pines that surrounded the ceremonial grounds. 18-year-old Serra stood at the center of the stone circle, her white ceremonial dress feeling more like a burial shroud than wedding attire. The fabric clung to her trembling frame as hundreds of wolves from neighboring packs gathered to witness what her father called a strategic alliance, and what she knew was nothing more than her sale to the highest bidder. Alpha Rowan Blackthorn stood across from her, his scarred face twisted into something between a smirk and a sneer. At 35, he was known throughout the territories not for his leadership, but for his cruelty. 3 previous mates had mysteriously disappeared, their fates whispered about in fearful tones around pack fires. His dark eyes raked over Serra with possessive hunger that made her skin crawl. "The binding words, girl," Elder Moravis commanded, his ancient voice cutting through the cold night air. "Speak them, and the bond will be sealed under the witness of the moon goddess herself." Serra's father, Beta Marcus of the Ironwood pack, stood rigid beside the elder, his expression carved from stone. He refused to meet her pleading gaze. Her mother had died 3 years ago, and with her passing, any protection Serra might have claimed died too. Her father saw only opportunity in Rowan's proposal: territory expansion, political favor, a seat closer to the Alpha Council. Serra's voice broke. The bond-marking ceremony required her consent, spoken freely under the moon. Without it, the union held no sacred weight. "I cannot." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled wolves. Rowan's face darkened, his hand shooting out to grip her wrist with bruising force. "You dare refuse me? Your father pledged you, the dowry is paid. You are mine by pack law and treaty." "Pack law requires willing consent for a mate bond," Serra whispered, though her voice shook with terror. "The moon goddess does not recognize forced chains." Rowan's backhanded strike sent her sprawling onto the cold stone. Blood bloomed from her split lip, tasting of copper and shame. The watching wolves remained silent. None would interfere in Alpha business, especially not for an unbonded Omega with no standing. "You will speak the words," Rowan snarled, dragging her upright by her hair, "or I will make you wish you had. Your father owes me this alliance, if not through sacred bond, then through conquest. So either way, you leave here as mine tonight. The ceremony cannot proceed under duress." The voice that rang out across the clearing was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Every wolf present immediately stilled, their instincts recognizing power far beyond anything their local alphas commanded. Through the gathered crowd, the sea of bodies parted like water before a blade. Alpha King Hadrian Stormcrest emerged from the shadows between the pines, moonlight catching on the silver threading of his formal coat. At his sides walked his personal guard, warriors whose reputations alone could silence rebellions. But it was Hadrian himself who commanded every eye, tall and broad-shouldered, with storm-grey eyes that seemed to see through flesh to the soul beneath, and an aura of controlled power that made even the air feel heavier. Rowan released Serra so suddenly she nearly fell again. "Your Majesty," he stammered, dropping into a clumsy bow. "This is merely a pack matter, a private ceremony. We did not expect clearly." Hadrian's gaze swept the ceremonial circle, lingering on Serra's bloodied face, her torn dress, her bruised wrist. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I was passing through Ironwood territory on my way to the northern summit when my scouts reported unusual activity. How fortunate that I decided to investigate personally." He moved forward with predatory grace, and despite herself, Serra felt her wolf stir for the first time in years, not in fear but in recognition. True alpha, protector, king. "The girl refuses the bond," Elder Moravis said carefully, his voice now uncertain. The presence of the Alpha King changed everything. "By ancient law she cannot be compelled. And yet," Hadrian said softly, his eyes never leaving Serra's face, "Alpha Blackthorn seemed quite determined to compel her. Tell me, Blackthorn, how did you acquire those scars across your knuckles? They look fresh. Defensive wounds, perhaps, from previous mates who also refused." Rowan's face went white. "The females were weak. They disappeared." Hadrian's voice dropped to a lethal purr. 3 mates in 5 years, each one pledged through family debt, each one gone without trace. The Alpha Council has been remiss in investigating these patterns. That ends tonight." He turned to Serra, and his expression softened in a way that made her chest ache. "What is your name, little wolf?" "Serra." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Serra Thorn, Your Majesty." "Serra." He repeated it like a prayer, like something precious. "Do you wish to be bound to this mail?" Every instinct screamed at her to be careful, to be political, to remember her place. But something in Hadrian's eyes, a warmth, a genuine concern, made her speak the truth she'd buried. "No. I would rather die." The words hung in the frigid air like visible breath. Her father made a sound of protest, but one look from Hadrian silenced him. "Then by my authority as Alpha King and Keeper of Pact Law across all territories, I hereby dissolve this proposed union." Hadrian's voice rang with ceremonial power. "The dowry will be returned, the treaty is void, and Alpha Blackthorn, you will present yourself to the council chambers in 3 days' time to answer for the disappearances of your previous mates. Failure to appear will be considered an admission of guilt." Rowan's face contorted with rage and humiliation. "You cannot simply... She was pledged. Her father's word... Her father's word is not hers to give." Hadrian's eyes flashed gold, his alpha aura expanding until every wolf present felt the weight of his dominance press down on them like a physical force. All except Serra, she noticed with wonder. His power flowed around her like water around stone, protective rather than oppressive. "And I just did. Challenge me if you dispute my authority." No one moved, no one dared. Even Rowan, for all his cruelty, was not fool enough to challenge the Alpha King. Hadrian extended his hand to Serra. "Come, you are under my protection now. No one will force you into bonds you do not choose." Serra stared at his offered hand, strong, scarred from battles she could only imagine, yet extended with such gentleness. Behind her lay her father's cold ambition, Rowan's brutality, a life of servitude and fear. Before her stood a stranger who had appeared like an answer to prayers she'd been too afraid to speak. She placed her trembling hand in his. The moment their skin touched, a jolt of recognition passed between them. Not the aggressive snap of a mate bond forcing itself into place, but something deeper, older, like the universe exhaling in relief. Hadrian's eyes widened fractionally, but he said nothing, merely closing his fingers around hers with careful reverence. "My king." Her father finally spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "She is my daughter, I have rights." "You forfeited those rights when you sold her to a known murderer for political favor." Hadrian's words were ice. "Be grateful I'm not investigating your own complicity in Blackthorn's crimes. Serra Thorn is now ward of the crown until such time as she chooses her own path. Any who dispute this answer to me personally." He turned, keeping Serra's hand secure in his, and began walking toward where his guard waited with horses. Serra followed, her legs weak but moving, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. As they left the ceremonial circle behind, she heard Rowan's snarled curse, her father's impotent protests, the whispers of the assembled pack spreading like wildfire. But none of it mattered. For the first time in 3 years, since her mother's death had left her vulnerable, Serra felt safe. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly, as Hadrian lifted her effortlessly onto his horse before mounting behind her. "The royal palace at Silver Peak," he replied, his arms settling around her waist to steady her, his warmth seeping through the thin fabric of her dress. "You'll be given chambers, protection, and time to heal. After that, the choice of your future is yours alone." Serra leaned back slightly against his solid chest as the horse began to move, carrying them away from Ironwood territory and everything she'd known. The autumn moon followed their path, and for the first time in years, its light felt like a blessing rather than a witness to her imprisonment. Chapter 2. The Palace of Silver and Secrets. The royal palace rose from the mountain like something carved by gods rather than wolves. White stone that gleamed under moonlight, towers that pierced the clouds, gardens that terraced down the slopes in cascades of silver flowers that only bloomed at night. Sarah had heard stories of Silver Peak her entire life, but none had prepared her for the reality of walking through its ancient gates as the Alpha King's personal guest. The journey had taken 3 days, during which Hadrian had been unfailingly courteous, ensuring she had the finest accommodations at each stop, never pressing her for conversation, simply offering steady, quiet presence. His guard treated her with deference that still felt surreal. She was nobody, an unbonded Omega from a minor pack, yet they addressed her as "my lady" and ensured her every comfort. Now, standing in the entrance hall while servants bustled around them, Sarah felt the weight of her new reality settle like a cloak across her shoulders. This was the heart of werewolf power, where alphas from every territory came to seek the king's counsel, where pack law was written and enforced, where legends walked as flesh and blood. Lady Thorne. An elegant woman descended the grand staircase, her silver hair braided with moonstone beads, her bearing regal despite her advanced years. "I am Celeste Ravenshade, the king's chief advisor and keeper of the royal household. His Majesty has asked me to see you settled." Sarah curtsied clumsily, unsure of proper protocol. "Thank you, Lady Ravenshade. I apologize for my ignorance of court customs. I don't wish to be a burden." "You are not a burden, child." Celeste's smile was warm, her amber eyes kind. "You are a young woman who has suffered greatly and deserves time to remember who you are beyond the labels others have forced upon you. Come, your chambers await." The rooms Celeste led her to were beyond anything Sarah had imagined. A suite with windows overlooking the moonlit gardens, a canopied bed large enough for 3 wolves, a bathing room with a pool fed by hot springs, and a wardrobe already filled with dresses in her size. Everything spoke of thoughtfulness, preparation, care. "The king arranged all this?" Sarah whispered, running her fingers over the soft fabric of a midnight blue gown. "He did." Celeste began unpinning Sarah's ruined ceremonial dress, her movements gentle. "Hadrian may seem stern to those who do not know him, but he has the most protective heart of any alpha I have served. When he saw you being struck, something in him shifted. I have not seen him so immediately certain of a decision in decades." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I don't understand why he would care about someone like me." "Someone like you?" Celeste guided her toward the bathing pool, which steamed invitingly. "A brave young woman who refused an abusive bond, even when it meant facing death. A wolf with enough strength to speak truth to power. Sarah, you are exactly the kind of person a good king protects." As Sarah sank into the heated water, feeling weeks of tension begin to dissolve, Celeste continued speaking while laying out fresh clothes. "The palace can be overwhelming at first. There are rules of conduct, hierarchies to navigate, political undercurrents that run deeper than the mountain springs. But you are under the king's direct protection. No one will dare harm you here." "What does that mean exactly?" Sarah asked. "Being under his protection?" Celeste paused, choosing her words carefully. "It means you are untouchable. Even the highest-ranking alphas who visit court will treat you with respect. It means you have freedom to move throughout the palace and grounds as you wish. It means—" She met Sarah's gaze directly. "It means Hadrian has claimed responsibility for your well-being personally, which he has not done for anyone outside his immediate circle in the 20 years since he took the throne. The implications of that settled over Sarah like morning frost. People will think I'm his, that people will speculate regardless of truth." Celeste's expression turned shrewd. "The question is whether their speculation troubles you or whether you find the reality of his attention. Welcome." Sarah thought of Hadrian's hand extended in the ceremonial circle, his voice calling her little wolf with such unexpected tenderness, the way his power had curved around rather than crushing her. She thought of how safe she'd felt on the 3-day journey, sleeping in camps guarded by his warriors, knowing he stood watch personally through each night. "I barely know him," she finally said. "True, but you have time to learn." Celeste handed her a drying cloth as she emerged from the pool. "For tonight, rest. Tomorrow the king has requested your presence at breakfast. Nothing formal, just an opportunity to speak privately, to understand your wishes moving forward." After Celeste departed, Sarah stood at the window in her new sleeping gown, looking out over the silver gardens. Below, she could see the Alpha King walking alone through the moonlit paths, his hands clasped behind his back, his powerful frame somehow lonely despite being surrounded by the most magnificent palace in all the territories. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Even from this distance their eyes met and held. Neither moved, neither looked away, and in that moment of connection, Sarah felt that same deep recognition from the ceremonial circle, like finding something she'd been missing without knowing it was lost. Hadrian raised his hand in a small wave, his expression softening into something almost vulnerable. Sarah returned the gesture, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Whatever was happening between them, whatever force had driven him to intervene when he had no obligation, whatever thread connected an Alpha King to an unbonded Omega girl, it was real. It was undeniable, and it terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. Chapter 3. Threads of Destiny. Morning sunlight filtered through the palace windows differently than moonlight, warmer, gentler, revealing details the night had softened. Sarah dressed carefully in a simple green gown that Celeste had labeled appropriate for informal breakfast, though anything in this palace seemed far too fine for someone of her station. A young servant named Mira appeared at her door precisely at dawn, her smile bright and welcoming. "Good morning, Lady Thorne. The king awaits you in the Eastern Solarium. It's his favorite place for morning meals when he's not dealing with official business." The solarium proved to be a glass-enclosed garden room overlooking a valley that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Hadrian stood with his back to the door, wearing simple training clothes rather than royal regalia, his dark hair still damp from what must have been an early run. He looked younger this way, less the untouchable king and more like a man enjoying a quiet morning. "Sarah." He turned as she entered, and his smile transformed his entire face. "I hope you slept well. Please sit. I took the liberty of having the kitchen prepare several options since I wasn't sure of your preferences. The table indeed held enough food for 10 wolves, fresh fruit, warm bread, honey, several types of cheese, eggs prepared 3 different ways, strips of venison and more." Sarah stared at the abundance, thinking of the meager breakfasts she'd endured in her father's house after her mother died. This is too much. Perhaps. Hadrian pulled out a chair for her with his own hands, a gesture that would have shocked any courtier who witnessed it. "But I wanted you to have choices. You've had too few of those lately." They sat across from each other, the morning sun painting everything gold. For several minutes they ate in comfortable silence, though Sarah remained hyper-aware of every movement he made. The elegant way he handled utensils despite his warrior's hands, the occasional glances he stole when he thought she wasn't looking, the barely contained energy that vibrated beneath his controlled exterior. "I want to thank you," Sarah finally said, "for everything. The intervention, the protection, these chambers. I have no way to repay such kindness." "There is no debt." Hadrian set down his cup, his storm-grey eyes serious. "What Blackthorn attempted was unconscionable. What your father allowed was worse. I did only what any decent Alpha should do. But you're not just any Alpha. You're the king. You had no obligation to involve yourself in a minor pack's internal matters." "Didn't I?" Something complicated flickered across his expression. "Sarah, can I speak plainly with you? Without the formality of court, without the weight of my position between us?" Her heart began racing. "Of course. When I saw you in that ceremonial circle, bloodied and terrified but still refusing to submit to cruelty, something in me recognized you." He leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. "I don't mean the mate bond. Though I suspect you felt what I did when we touched, I mean something deeper, like my soul had been waiting for yours without knowing it was searching." Sarah's breath caught. "I felt it too, but I don't understand it. You're the Alpha King, I'm nobody. You are not nobody." The words came out almost fierce. "You are brave and principled and stronger than you know, and I—" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so vulnerable it made him seem almost boyish. "I have been Alpha King for 20 years. I have led councils, ended wars, judged disputes that would have fractured lesser territories, but I have been alone, Sarah. surrounded by thousands, yet fundamentally alone. Every female who has sought my attention wanted the crown, the power, the prestige. None wanted Hadrian. "I don't want those things either," Sarah said softly. "I just want to be safe, to be free, to choose my own path." "I know." His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers, offering but not demanding. "That's why I'm going to make you a proposition, not as king to subject, but as one wolf to another." Sarah placed her hand in his, feeling that electric recognition spark between them again. "Tell me, stay here at Silver Peak for one moon cycle," Hadrian said. "Not as my mate, not with any bonds or obligations, just as yourself, free to explore the palace and grounds, to heal from what you've endured, to learn what you want from life. Let me court you properly, not with power or position, but with the simple question of whether we might fit together. And at the end of that moon cycle you choose, stay or leave, accept what's growing between us or walk away. No consequences either way, your freedom guaranteed regardless." It was the most extraordinary offer Sarah had ever received. A king proposing to court her, to give her time and choice and autonomy. Most alphas would have simply claimed her after the bond snap they'd both felt, using their authority to override her will. Hadrian was offering the opposite. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you give me such power over you?" "Because if we are meant to be," Hadrian said, his thumb stroking gently over her knuckles, "it should be because you choose it freely, not because I overwhelmed you with authority or rescued you from danger. I want you to know your own mind, your own heart. I want you to choose me because I'm worthy of you, not because you feel obligated or grateful." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. No one in her entire life had ever offered her such respect, such fundamental regard for her autonomy. "And if, at the end of the moon cycle, I choose to leave, then I will provide you with resources to establish yourself anywhere in the territories you wish," Hadrian said without hesitation. "A house, funds, protection, your freedom, completely and utterly." Sarah looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, calloused from weapons training but gentle beyond measure. She thought of the fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years, the hopelessness of her situation before he'd appeared like an answer to unspoken prayers. She thought of the spark between them, the recognition that felt older than this lifetime. She thought of the terrifying, thrilling possibility that maybe, just maybe, she deserved something beautiful after all the darkness. "I accept your proposition," Sarah said, meeting his gaze directly. "One moon cycle, to know each other, to see if this connection is real or just circumstantial. And I promise to be honest about what I discover." The smile that broke across Hadrian's face was incandescent, transforming him from powerful king into something purely joyful. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "Then let the courtship begin, little wolf." Chapter 4. The Moon's Revelation. The moon cycle passed like a dream made tangible. Hadrian kept his word with meticulous care, courting Sarah without overwhelming her, showing her the palace's secrets without demanding she commit to staying, introducing her to his inner circle while ensuring she knew she could refuse any social obligation. He took her running through the mountain forests at dawn, teaching her to find joy in her wolf form again after years of keeping that part of herself small and subdued. They spent afternoons in the royal library, where she discovered a passion for ancient history and he revealed his own love of poetry. Evenings found them in the solarium, talking for hours about everything and nothing, pack politics, childhood memories, dreams for the future, fears they'd never spoken aloud. Through it all, the bond between them grew not through magical compulsion, but through genuine compatibility. Sarah discovered that beneath the Alpha King's powerful exterior lived a male who loved terrible jokes, who worried about every wolf in his territory like they were pack, who carried the weight of leadership with grace, but sometimes felt crushed by its isolation. Hadrian learned that Sarah possessed a sharp mind for strategy, a generous heart despite the cruelty she'd endured, and a quiet strength that had kept her soul intact through years of emotional abuse. He watched her blossom in the palace's safety, her laughter coming easier, her opinions expressed without fear, her natural confidence emerging like spring growth after winter. The entire court watched their courtship with fascination and, from some quarters, disapproval. Several high-ranking alphas made clear their belief that the king should choose a mate of proper lineage, someone with territory and political connections. But Hadrian shut down such commentary with icy finality, making clear that his choice, if Sarah chose him in return, would stand regardless of political convenience. Now, as the full moon of the cycle's end rose over Silver Peak, Sarah stood once more in ceremonial white, but this time by her own choice, in a dress she'd selected, in a place where she felt safe. The private ceremony ground behind the palace held only Hadrian's closest circle: Celeste, his head guard Marcus, and the ancient priestess, Grandmother Moon, keeper of sacred rites. Hadrian waited at the stone altar, dressed in formal regalia that emphasized his role as Alpha King, but couldn't hide the vulnerable hope in his eyes. He had laid his heart bare over the past moon cycle, had shown her every facet of who he was beyond the crown. Now the choice fell to Sarah, exactly as he'd promised. Sarah Thorne. Grandmother Moon's voice carried the weight of centuries. You stand before witnesses and the moon goddess herself, free to choose your path. Alpha King Hadrian Stormcrest offers you the mate bond, not through compulsion or political arrangement, but through true recognition. He offers partnership, protection, and love freely given. What say you? Sarah looked at Hadrian, truly looked at him, seeing all the ways he'd honored his word, all the care he'd shown, all the love he'd been too careful to speak, but that shone from every action. She thought of the broken girl she'd been in Ironwood Territory's ceremonial circle, certain she'd rather die than be bound against her will. She thought of who she'd become in this moon cycle, stronger, happier, whole in ways she'd forgotten were possible. She thought of the future stretching before them like an unwritten story, full of possibility and choice. I say yes, Sarah spoke clearly, her voice carrying no tremor of doubt. I choose Hadrian Stormcrest as my mate, my partner, my king. Not because he saved me, but because in knowing him, I found someone worthy of the choice. Not because I'm grateful, but because I love him. The words hung in the air like bells ringing. Hadrian's eyes widened, moisture gathering at their corners. Sarah, I love you, she repeated, stepping forward to close the distance between them. You gave me time to know my own heart, and my heart knows yours. It recognizes you as home. I love you, Hadrian said, his voice rough with emotion. From that first moment in the ceremonial circle, through every day of this moon cycle, into whatever future we build together. You are my mate, my queen, my equal in all things. Grandmother Moon smiled, raising her hands to the full moon above. Then, under the witness of the moon goddess and by the ancient laws of our kind, I recognize this bond. Speak your vows, and let the connection form as it was meant to, freely chosen, freely given, freely received. The vows were simple but profound, promising partnership over dominance, trust over possession, love over duty. As they spoke them, Sarah felt the true mate bond snap into place, not the aggressive claiming she'd feared with Rowan, but a golden thread connecting her heart to Hadrian's, warm and right and perfect. When Grandmother Moon pronounced them bonded, Hadrian cupped Sarah's face with infinite tenderness and kissed her for the first time. The connection between them blazed like starfire, their wolves howling in recognition, the bond settling into place like the final piece of a puzzle finally complete. The small gathering erupted in celebration. Celeste wiped tears from her eyes. Marcus whooped like a young wolf rather than a dignified guard. Grandmother Moon laughed with the pure joy of witnessing true destiny fulfilled. But Sarah and Hadrian remained lost in each other, foreheads pressed together, breathing synchronized, the bond humming between them like music. My queen, Hadrian whispered, my mate, my Sarah. My king, Sarah replied, smiling through happy tears. My partner, my Hadrian. As the full moon blessed their union and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sarah realized that the girl who'd stood broken in Ironwood Territory had died in that ceremonial circle. In her place had emerged a woman who knew her own worth, who'd been given the rarest gift of all, True choice, true partnership, true love. And in choosing Hadrian, she'd chosen herself. The bond would face challenges, certainly. Court politics, territorial disputes, the normal complications of any partnership, but they would face them together, as equals, as mates who'd found each other not through fate's compulsion, but through courage, respect, and the simple truth that some souls recognize their perfect match. The moon goddess had blessed their union not because it was convenient or politically advantageous, but because it was real, and that made all the difference.